Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. I'm here with Big Blue Views Tony DelGenio as we give the post-mortem from the Giants' latest loss, 27-22 in Week 9 to the Washington Commanders. Morning, Tony. How are you?
I'm doing fine, thanks. And
Hey, at least this one was a 1 o'clock game.
I love the 1 o'clock games.
Yes.
Yeah, I like the 9:30 games the best. I
I,
love getting up and watching a game from Europe, especially if the Giants are in it. Get it over with early.
Yeah, I won't be too upset about a 9:30 game that pretty much has me done with my work by the middle of Sunday afternoon, this coming Sunday when the Giants play Carolina. Won't be upset about that at all.
Yeah, the Cam
But
Ward Bowl.
pardon me?
The Cam Ward Bowl.
Yes. Yes. Unfortunately, it's not just the Giants and the Panthers. There's about 7 teams in the Cam Ward Bowl at this point, which makes it highly unlikely, that he lands with the Giants, but so be it. Just let me start with with asking you for for some generic thoughts on what you saw Sunday.
Well, the Giants remain competitive. I'll say that. They have not given up. They're still trying. I do feel like they have made up some unusual game plans lately. I thought yesterday was one of them. I think that Daboll ran the ball on something like 21 of the first 25 plays, and of course they were successful running the ball. They have developed a pretty decent running game, and Tyrone Tracy has really been a nice find for them. And they of course had a disaster one of the times that they did drop back to pass, but still, I feel that if you're trying to win the game, you have to mix in a little bit more passing. And so I have to admit that I was mystified by their failure to try to pass at all, basically throughout the first half. And I guess it's a statement about the lack of confidence that Daboll has in either the offensive line or Daniel Jones or both at this point, that he's opting to do that against a team that's not necessarily blessed with a great pass defense. And so I guess it is what it is, but that says something about how the team has been constructed.
Yeah, I guess I didn't have a problem with it, Tony, for the simple reason that it was working. They were ripping off big chunks. Washington wasn't stopping that running game. And so the Giants just leaned into it. A couple of occasions when they did try to pass, it got ugly early in the game. I personally thought it was more of a statement about Washington not being able to stop the run and perhaps Daboll not being 100% comfortable with the protection as much as anything to do with Daniel Jones per se. Let's since we're talking about Daniel Jones, let's just have the Daniel Jones discussion. He had the fumble on that first series, and I'm not going to fault Daniel Jones for that play. Some people will say, "Oh, he didn't have the pocket presence to know that the rush was coming." Well, the guy was there a whole heck of a lot faster than he should have been there. That was on Chris Hubbard. Brian Daboll said that was a screen pass. And when you look at it, Daboll might have been right that if Jones was able to throw that ball, that might have hit for a big play. But, and it's weird that Jones had 0 passing yards yesterday. It's very weird. 0 passing yards at halftime. And again, he had a touchdown pass, but he had 0 passing yards. So just odd. And I know that Daniel Jones has limitations, and I know that the body of work isn't good enough, but I gave Daniel Jones a kudos this morning. And all in all, I just look at it like you've got to give the guy credit when he deserves it. And the way he ran the ball yesterday, running through people, running over people, you know, running with a desire to win a football game. He threw 2 touchdown passes, should have thrown a third because, of the highly questionable pass interference call on Darius Slayton for, maybe you can make an argument that Slayton threw a little bit of a shoulder, but that was a silly call. Absolutely silly call. I just think you have to give Jones credit for the way that he played yesterday. But we're here at 2-7, and regardless of how well he played yesterday, and I'll let you speak to that in a second, regardless of how well he played yesterday, the conversation of how much longer he can be the starting quarterback has to take place.
Yeah, so I think I agree with everything that you said about that. I thought that at least on the surface of it, he had one of his best games of the season. I thought that he might have been able to tuck that ball away on the fumble. I thought it was a ridiculous call as to who got possession of the fumble.
It was
and
just
how that
weirdly,
should be called once the whistle is blown. So
it was weirdly officiated, no doubt. Weirdly
yeah,
officiated.
yeah. So I thought maybe he could have tucked the ball down, and knowing that you have someone at left tackle that is new to the team and had trouble last week protecting, you'd kind of think that you'd kind of look at what's happening there out of the corner of your eye as you drop back to pass. But I don't know, I'm not a football player, so I don't know whether that was feasible or not. But overall, I agree with you. He actually seemed to have a very good day. Now, whether there are plays where he dropped back to pass and had someone 20 yards deep and he opted to throw a short pass, I don't know. I'll wait for the people who analyze the all 22 to indicate whether they think he passed up a bigger chunk plays. But for the plays that he ran and the passes that he threw, he really did a very good job. He was getting the crap beat out of him yesterday, and he's just a tough son of a gun. And you've got to give him that. I mean, as you say, he had 2 touchdown passes. He ran for that touchdown where he bounced off 2 Washington defenders to get himself into the end zone. And so I feel bad for him in many ways. I mean, he's heroic out there. He has taken so many hits, and he stands in there and keeps on going, and they just don't seem to be able to run an efficient offense with him. And so it seems like he's almost certainly going to be gone after this year. But there's a part of me that feels very sorry for him, because I really feel like he's definitely giving them 100% of what he has.
He absolutely is, Tony. And when we begin to have the conversation of when will Daniel Jones get benched, because let's be realistic, at some point, as I said, Jones, I gave him kudos yesterday. At some point, you understand that the body of work over time hasn't been good enough. You understand that whether it's a bridge quarterback or a first round pick or whatever it is next year, at some point in time, the Giants have to move on. They have to change the narrative. They have to try something different. And benching him is coming, for the simple reason that the way that he plays and the situation they're in with the offensive line, he does not avoid contact. He will put his shoulder down. He ran through those 2 guys on the touchdown run. I think it was a 12-yard run that he had where he was stiff arming and running through a defensive back. He wants the yardage, and he wants to try to win. I will say this, benching him is coming, and maybe it's coming after the bye week, which is after Carolina. But I will say this, people are calling for Jones to be benched. You cannot bench Daniel Jones after the way he played on Sunday. You can't do it. I don't think you can do it. Not as well as he played, not as hard as he played, not coming off the fact that every defensive player that I talked to on Sunday after the game said, this loss is on the defense, it's not on the offense. This is not the week when you can do it. Like I said, maybe after the bye, especially if the Giants lose to Carolina, and we know it's coming because something different has to happen. But you cannot, in my view, you cannot do it this week.
I agree with all of that. I think next week, if they lose to Carolina, then that and with the bye coming up after that, then that is the perfect time to make that move. With, I mean, still a reasonable number of games. They'll still have 7 games left after that, but that does give them 7 games to, let's say, give Tommy DeVito a chance to show whether he looks like he's made enough progress to be a viable backup quarterback on the team, or whether they need to move on from him also. Although I think if they did move on, I suspect Drew Lock would get the first start after the bye, not DeVito. Yeah, and especially if they lose, then it puts them in better position to get the number 1 draft pick without having to trade up for it or anything like that. As you say, there are a lot of teams with 2 wins right now, but it certainly puts them in prime position to get that. Obviously, a big question will be how many quarterbacks coming out of this next year's draft are desirable enough to really draft, let's say, in the top 5 or top 3, if you want to do that. And unfortunately, the NFL has turned into this league where without a great quarterback, you don't have much of a chance, and so teams are grasping at anything that they can to get hold of a quarterback, including drafting quarterbacks much higher than they should be drafted. I mean, the latest example of that, we've seen the Colts bench Anthony Richardson, who is a guy who has all the potential in the world, but who, by the time he was drafted, had so little experience as a quarterback that the idea of drafting him as high as number 9 was really kind of ridiculous. He's exactly the
He was
type of
drafted
guy.
number 4.
I'm sorry, number 4. Who was drafted? Somebody else was drafted number 9. Who was
I'm not sure,
I
but
can't remember who was
Richardson was drafted number
But,
4, and
yeah,
that was just insane.
Right. So he was a type of prospect who should have been drafted at the bottom of the first round. Tons of physical potential, but very little on tape and very little experience to really make you think, that he was ready to play. And there he is playing as a rookie until he hurts himself, of course. And so, but that's the way things are these days. Going into this most recent draft, we were talking for a while about quarterbacks like Bo Nix and Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy being drafted in mid-first round, late first round, even maybe early in the second round, and the Giants might pick up one of them fairly cheap or something like that by trading back into the bottom of the first round, the way Baltimore did to get Lamar Jackson years ago. But that type of thing just doesn't happen anymore, because even those quarterbacks now are going. Wow, they were all gone in the top 12, I believe.
Top 12, yes,
or
and
something like that.
yep.
So, yeah, so that's the problem these days, is that you really have to commit to guys with a top 10 draft pick that may not be worth using a top 10 draft pick on the way they performed and the amount of experience they have. So it's a difficult situation for the Giants and every team that needs a quarterback.
Absolutely, there are. Looking at the draft order, there are 7 teams at 2-7, and the Giants, based on strength of schedule, are 7th in the draft order. And just based on those teams, Tony, I look at 1, 2, 3, the 4 teams directly in front of the Giants: Las Vegas, Cleveland, Carolina, and New Orleans. All 4 of those teams are going to be in the quarterback market. Tennessee and the Jets, who are right behind the Giants in the current draft order, are going to be in the quarterback market. So there aren't that many quarterbacks who deserve to be drafted in the first round, there aren't that many quarterbacks who will be franchise guys or who will be starters in the NFL available to teams. So it's it's anybody's guess as to whether the Giants could actually get the quarterback that they want, which of course will lead to questions going back to last year's draft about, as good as Malik Neighbors is, should Joe Shane have pushed his chips to the table and taken, one of McCarthy or Penix or Nix? And I think the answer to that just is, well, it depends on how good of players they turn into.
Yeah, that's right. And so, to me, I mean, given that, I honestly think the Giants are too good a team to actually finish with the number 1 draft pick, or even the number 2 or number 3 draft pick. And as you say, their strength of schedule works against them in any case. And so I really feel what's going to have to happen in the offseason is that they get themselves a bridge quarterback, a Joe Flacco-ish, Jacoby Brissett, Jameis Winston, et cetera, type of quarterback, and then draft someone either with their first or second pick, depending on how things fall out, who's developmental and it gives them, a year to sit and just learn the game before they actually get thrown into action. I don't know. I'm not sure what other options they have.
I agree with you, Tony. And, the other thing is, you can say, okay, suppose they sit at 7 or 8 or 9 or wherever. Everybody who needs a quarterback is going to be knocking on New England's door, making offers.
Mm-hmm.
And are the New York Giants in a position to give up something like 3 first-round draft picks to go and get a quarterback? Is that actually going to push the franchise forward, or is that going to hamstring a quarterback, whoever it is, even if it's Cam Ward or Shadur Sanders or whoever it is, Jalen Milroe, whoever? Is that going to just guarantee that this whoever they draft, is surrounded by a bad football team for the entirety of his rookie contract? I just don't see the Giants being in position, being a deep enough football team to be able to make that move. I just don't. So maybe it's whoever's left wherever they draft. Maybe it's take a guy on day 2, and cross your fingers, or punt a big move, to another year, maybe when you can, compile some draft capital. But it's a very difficult spot, for the Giants to be in at quarterback.
Yeah, and it's just the way the NFL is right now. And I mean, the NFL is kind of slowly shifting in another direction, because you're not seeing quarterbacks put up the highlight reel plays and yardage and touchdowns the way they were doing a few years ago. So I think that aspect of the NFL reached its peak, sometime in the last few years, and is going a little bit the other way now. But I don't know that teams have reacted to the fact that that's happened yet. Still, no one has demonstrated yet that you can win a Super Bowl in today's NFL without a great starting quarterback. And so
Right.
that's the dilemma.
And what you need on a week-to-week basis, and in no way, shape, or form do I think Daniel Jones was the difference in Sunday's game. I think Daniel Jones did everything he could to put the Giants in position to win a game. He led 2 first-half drives that could have ended up in scores, even though they were both mostly handing the ball off. But in the second half, when Brian Daboll turned him loose, he led 3 long scoring drives. And the one that turned into a field goal probably should have been a touchdown. So, but the fact of the matter is, even on a week-to-week basis, what you need in the NFL is a quarterback who can at least sometimes lift a team past mistakes, who can sort of play above the fray of what's going on around him. And when push comes to shove, that just hasn't been Daniel Jones often enough. And it really is time for the Giants to, going into next year to try something different.
Yeah.
If for no other reason than to give us something else to argue about.
Right. and I mean that, in some sense that was, I don't want to say that was the plan all along, but if you look at how the Jones contract is structured, Joe Shane did plan for this very possibility, and he gave himself a chance. People complain about Jones's big cap hit this year and how that prevented them from bringing back Saquon, prevented them from bringing back Xavier McKinney, and so on. But that's not actually true. They could have kept either or both of those guys if Shane was willing to put some money in void years and things like that, which he doesn't like to do. And that's a separate discussion, but I think that's maybe an appropriate thing for a team that's not ready yet to compete for a Super Bowl. But the fact is he put himself in a position to move on next year to a new quarterback, and so at least the Giants are in a good situation financially to do that in 2025. It's just the practical difficulty of finding a great quarterback in a league that now almost requires a great quarterback to win with, and in a football landscape where there are not that many great quarterbacks around.
Absolutely. Tony, let's move off the quarterback thing, a little bit here. And the other reality for the New York Giants is they are a very young football team. Okay. And I'm not talking about just roster age, okay, because there is a difference. NFL teams, there's very little overall difference in roster age. It's, from the youngest to the oldest. What there is a difference in is how much teams are requiring of their young players, of their first-year players, of their second-year players. The last stats I saw on this, what they call snap-weighted age in the NFL, the Giants, in terms of snap counts, were playing the second youngest roster in the NFL, and the Green Bay Packers were playing the youngest. And we can argue about why Green Bay is successful with it and why the Giants aren't successful with it. And a lot of it has to do with which team has the better quarterback. So, so there's that, but that's part of the discussion. But the reality of it is, when you're playing and asking so much of young players, you don't always get it. Brian Burns has been talking for a couple of weeks now about players needing to grow up, players needing to mature, players needing to understand that this is the NFL, it's not college. I had a conversation last night with Rakeem Nunez-Roches with Nacho about this, and he said the same exact thing. He said these kids need to understand that this is a job now. It's not a college free ride scholarship. It's not all fun and games. This is their business. It's a career. And the reality of it is, there are some really good young players on this Giants team. This draft class from Joe Shane in 2024 is really, really good. And yet we see mistakes. Drew Phillips made a huge missed tackle last night, where he admitted to not only missing the tackle, but being out of position. Tyler Nubin admitted that he completely misread the play in the last 2 minutes, where the Washington, wide receiver got behind him and went for 42 yards. He was expecting something different, and he didn't play the play that was in front of him. or as it turned out, behind him. Tay Banks continues to just look lost out there. No effort related issues with Banks on Sunday, but definitely performance related issues. Theo Johnson made a nice touchdown catch, but I thought Theo Johnson left a lot of plays that could have been made on the field on Sunday. So a lot of young Giants players with a lot of ability and with a lot of potential who at this point are leaving a lot on the field. And and maybe you just have to live with that. But the Giants need these guys to grow up and grow up quickly.
Yeah, and so the one thing that interested me last night that I read about was that Drew Phillips actually took responsibility for I guess it was the first Terry McLaurin touchdown that where Banks was covering him, but he claimed that he and Banks were supposed to execute a switch when McLaurin cut inside on the slant, and that Phillips was supposed to take responsibility for McLaurin at that point, and then Banks was supposed to take whoever the other receiver was, whether it was Noah Brown.
Yeah, I wasn't clear on how that all was supposed to work.
Yeah,
but Banks also, or not Banks, Phillips also took responsibility for the 3rd and 18 missed tackle that led to that Banks play, that led to the 18-yard touchdown pass. So I love that. I love Tyler Nubin took responsibility, for his mistake too. And I love that. You hope that these guys learn from it. And it's painful to go through, as they do.
Yeah. And right. And so, on the one hand, as you say, it looks like this has the potential to be a really, really good draft class for them. I mean, you can argue that from top to bottom, they got players who might wind up playing a significant role with the Giants going forward. And it's actually pretty rare to say that about any draft class by any team, that more than half of the draftees wind up being good players and playing a significant role. But as you say, it's really frustrating right now. And just to go back to what you said earlier, this is a game that was really lost by the Giants defense. And it's one of the few that I think you can say that about this year, but this was certainly that game. And you look at that defense, which has been, I think, better than most of us or many of us thought it might be this year, but we're now halfway through the season, and the only interception that defense has was the one that Darius Muasau got in week 1 after the game had already been decided, when a Sam Darnold pass was tipped and floated through the air. So this is a team that's not taking away the ball from the opposition at all, and so you're just hoping that they stop the other team before they get into scoring position. And that's something that I think has accumulated and is starting to hurt them week to week, is that they're not turning the ball over to the offense. And so, yeah, they're very young, and related to that is, why are they very young? They're very young because Joe Shane, for the most part, has decided not to sign veteran free agents. I mean, he's made exceptions. He made the trade last year for Darren Waller. All right. But for the most part, he could have gone after a veteran cornerback in free agency. Stephon Gilmore was out there, for example. You can do that type of thing. He didn't bring Adoree Jackson back until he was almost forced to at the last minute, just to have another healthy body there. But he hasn't chosen to stock the team with veteran free agents. You compare that to Washington, and you look at the difference between 2023 Washington and 2024 Washington, and Washington has added Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu and Zach Ertz, who they brought, that was not last year. I guess they've had him for several years now. I'm trying to remember who else Washington has brought in, but they've been signing notable free agents to help them perform now, not 5 years from now. 5 years from now, I suspect Bobby Wagner will be out of the league. Zach Ertz will be out of the league. So the Giants are staying away from signing that type of player. And again, I think that just tells you that Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll did not think this team was ready yet. And so why spend the money now on guys who aren't going to be there when you are ready to compete for a title?
Yeah. The last thing I want to say about the defense, Tony, the defense has been really good all year. And generally, when we look at games, we can say, it was the offense more than the defense, or it was the special teams, but it generally hasn't been the defense. And again, just going back to my conversation with Nacho, he looked at me last night and he said, we have zero margin for error. He said, if all three units don't play as well as they can play, we don't win. And last night, when you look at it, every time the Giants scored, the defense allowed a long drive for points by the Commanders, sometimes touchdowns, sometimes field goals. But every time the Giants scored, the Commanders answered with a score. And the one time the Commanders didn't answer with a score was the final possession of the game, when the Commanders answered by driving the ball 69 yards to the Giants' 1 yard line, and then kneeling a couple of times to run out the clock and not give the Giants a chance to win the game, with the ball in their hands. So, bad night for the defense, just like too many nights this season have been bad for the offense. And there have been too many special team snafus and just all signs of a bad football team. Tony, I want to mention something here quickly. Giants play on Sunday in Germany against the Panthers. We, sitting in the press box yesterday, we sort of kiddingly were talking about, myself and a couple of the other reporters, saying, I wonder what the line is on that game Sunday. And this was, before Carolina. This was actually before the game even started. So before Carolina had played New Orleans. And the line was Giants by 5.5. 5.5. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And I'm looking at the line right now after the Giants fell to 2-7. And after Carolina beat New Orleans, which isn't a very good team either, to be honest. But the line is still Giants by 5.5. I'm a little bit blown away by that.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's that high. It doesn't surprise me that the Giants are favored against Carolina in a neutral setting, because Carolina has really been awful this year, despite the fact that they managed to win yesterday against a Saints team that has, I think, had their own problems the last few weeks. But 5 points seems a lot to me. I mean, you look at the Carolina team and they just don't have a lot of talent, especially on offense. They don't have a lot of talent. I mean, they had no receivers last year for Bryce Young, and I mean, they improved a little bit this year, but they still don't have a great set of receivers. Bryce Young himself seems like he hasn't figured things out yet, and I don't know whether their coaching is doing a good job or what. But they look like a team that is capable of losing most weeks. That being said, they have the same number of wins right now than the Giants do, and so I'm in no position as a Giants fan to to criticize the Panthers. They could easily win next week. But I'm surprised it's as large as 5 points. 2 points, 3 points, I could say.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about Brian Daboll. All right. I had 2 issues. I think you had the same 2 issues with Daboll in Sunday's game. I, for the life of me, don't understand this whole fascination with the analytic approach to 2-point conversions, especially when you're down by 2 scores. The Giants 2 weeks in a row have done this, down by 2 scores, get a touchdown, go for 2 points, fail, put themselves in a situation where they have no choice but to again go for 2 points. And last night, they go for 2. When they're down 24-16, they fail. Then Washington kicks a field goal. The Giants get a touchdown. They go for 2 points again, fail again. It's 27-22. Well, do the math. If you do the simple thing and kick 2 extra points, you're down by 3 points. If you get a defensive stop, you have both the opportunity to tie the game with a field goal or drive down the field and win the game with a touchdown. With the score at 27-22, the only choice that you have is a miracle desperation touchdown. I don't understand the analytics, the leaning on analytics there, and the chasing of points when it's not necessary. Maybe I said last night in one of my stories, maybe I'm just an old get off your lawn guy, which I kind of am at home because I am the lawn guy in the neighborhood, and everybody knows it, which is kind of creepy. Everybody knows I'm the lawn guy in the neighborhood. And they're like, "Oh, you're the lawn guy." Then people are like, "Stay off that guy's lawn." but the point is, I don't care what the analytics say. I think that's a mistake. I think chasing points when you don't have to chase them is a mistake.
Yeah, so I'm not as down on the idea of going for 2 down 14 points, and I do understand the philosophy in principle in terms of how many chances you give yourself to win the game when you adopt that approach to things. The thing is, it's based on historical statistics for how often teams are successful at making the 2-point conversion. Okay. And the answer to that is historically it's about a 50-50 proposition as to whether a team is going to make a given 2-point conversion or not. And when you do the math that way, you realize that it, in the universe of possibilities out there, that approach of doing things, if you were to do it 10 times or 100 times, would come out in your favor more often than not. But an interesting thing has been happening this year. All of a sudden, teams are not being successful at 2-point conversions. And so as opposed to the historical approximately 50% success, this year teams are only successful so far 31% of the time. And you could say, well, it's a small sample, but we're halfway through the season. And so going from about 50% down to 31%, something weird is happening in the league that is preventing offenses from being successful on those. And if you only have a 1 in 3 chance instead of a 1 in 2 chance of making the 2-point conversion, then your odds of winning the game, if you go for it, are clearly out of your favor. And so for that reason alone, I wouldn't do it. And then if you look at the Giants specifically, they tried twice yesterday, failed twice yesterday, and their total for the year is 0 for 6 on 2-point
points,
conversion.
0 for 6.
Yeah, 0 for 6 on 2-point conversion attempts. And so, you look at the Giants offense, and it's not some quirk. It's not as if, this is the 2007 Patriots who are 0 for 6 in 2-point conversion. You would say that's just a statistical quirk because that was such a great offense. Everybody knows the Giants have a bad offense so far this year. And so the fact that they're 0 for 6 on 2-point attempts, I think, is telling you that they're just not a good team to do that type of thing. Maybe there's a specific reason for it. Maybe it's because they're offensive. They don't have a really bullying offensive line who can get the 2 yards on a running play. They don't have the great Plaxico Burress type X receiver who can just do a fade to the end zone and catch a 50-50 ball for the 2-point conversion. And so they have to be more clever to do it. But whatever the reason is, it's just not working for the Giants, and it seems to be working less league wide. So I have to admit, when they went out for the 2-point conversion, my gut reaction yesterday was, oh no, just kick the extra point.
Yeah, and the other thing that I wondered about, 2:48 left in the game. I guess I would, and it sort of didn't ended up not mattering because of the 42-yard pass on 2nd and 9. But I would have much preferred to see Brian Daboll use his timeouts aggressively before the 2-minute warning, for the simple reason that if the Commanders are going to run the ball, if you use a timeout after the first play, you're calling timeout with roughly 2:40 left in the game.
Mhm.
You get 2 more stops, you get a 3 and out. You're getting the ball. Granted, you have no timeouts, but the theory would have been you're getting the football with more than 2 minutes to play, with the 2-minute warning as a timeout, and a legitimate chance for your offense not to have to play from desperation mode, probably seeing the football with 45 or 50 seconds left in the game. And so I thought that the way that the Giants played that sort of decreased their opportunity to have a chance to win the game.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I mean, it's hard to know what to say because, as you say, kind of most of the afternoon at least, they didn't really stop the Washington offense. I mean, they kept them out of the end zone
Right.
often enough, but they didn't really stop the Washington offense. Washington did drive up and down the field on them quite a bit, and so maybe it was a moot point the way things were going yesterday. But in principle, at least, I agree that it's an aggressive way to approach the game, to take the timeouts early and try to put Washington on the spot of having to give you the ball back with plenty of time left on the clock. And I think that would have been a nice thing to do.
Yeah, I think we'll have at some point we'll have the conversation about Brian Daboll's job security and Joe Shane's job security, but the more this spirals, the more that's going to become a topic of conversation. But I do think we will. I think we'll table that one for this week, or at least for now, and maybe we'll have that one during the bye week.
Mm-hmm.
But before we call it a day, just anything else that you wanted to hit, that you wanted to mention before we sign off?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to say is that at the beginning of the season, I think everyone pointed out what an awful first half of the season schedule the Giants had coming up. They had 2 what people considered winnable games the first 2 weeks, and then people thought that they had 6 in a row against contenders, and that it was going to be a very tough first half of the season for the Giants. And if they could survive that, then in the second half of the season, they had many more chances to win games. Well, it didn't turn out the way people thought. Minnesota turned out to be much better than people thought. Washington turned out to be much better than people thought. Dallas turned out not to be as good, but still, they have, other than the Minnesota game and to some extent the Philadelphia game, the Giants have hung right in there with every other team that they have played, and their record could easily be much better after this first half of the season than it actually is. And so, they're not, at least not yet, like that 2021 Joe Judge team was at the end of the season, when they were just starting to get blown out and embarrassed by other teams and looked just kind of pathetic. These Giants are hanging in there, and they're competitive in almost every game. And so it'll be interesting to see how long that goes on.
I would say that they're not hopeless. They're not outclassed every week. There's enough there that you see to think that maybe they're not as far away from, from being a truly competitive team as some of these other 2-7, 2-6 teams, that you're staring at as well. But they're still 2-7. It's still another lost season where there are going to be a whole bunch of games played here over the next few weeks that mean absolutely nothing toward the 2024 standings, and that's a bummer. But you and I will still be here every day after the games, talking about these things and commiserating and giving Giants fans somebody to yell at, I guess. Which they do enough of that in the comments, Tony. They
Yep,
do enough of
yep.
that in the comments.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Yeah, I back in the day when I was first starting this website, long time ago, I used to spend a lot of time engaging in those comments and trying to build the website and all of that. And these days, it's the last place I want to go. Sadly, it's the last place I want to go. But anyway, Tony, I appreciate the time, and we'll be back here next Monday after the Giants face the Panthers. So, Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there, take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.